Okay, this is a 2001 Toyota Land Cruiser JDM import, and we're going to be doing a timing belt change. Taking the old one out. It's got a little over 100,000 kilometers on it, and we're going to be taking the old timing belt out and replacing it. We're also going to be doing some suspension work to the vehicle in the process, but first we're going to work on getting the timing belt out and replaced. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on removing the bottom cover, the undercarriage cover from the thing, so we can access the drain plug to drain the coolant out. Okay, so here's the underside. We've got the skid plate off. Skid plate's nice and heavy duty. It has 10 bolts in there, and those bolts go in 1, 2, and 3 up front. Number 4 over at the side here. Number 5 corresponding on the side. 6 and 7 are part of this hanging plate. And that hanging plate, as you can see, it's back here. There's a bolt welded onto the back. There's also this big circular area at the bottom there with a hole in it that goes up here. And that's one bolt that'll hold the thing on that you need to get off. And then the other 2 bolts were just at the back of this secondary plate. I didn't have to lower that, but I did, just to make it a little easier to get the plate on and off. So now that we have that off, we can get ready to drain the actual coolant out of this. I think it's using Toyota Red in this thing. And then we'll start getting ready to do some other stuff. Okay, so as you can see, I've attached a tube onto the drain. We're draining out the coolant, and we've released this butterfly valve. So if I turn it this direction, it'll tighten. If I turn the butterfly valve this direction, it'll loosen. And also at the same time, we open up the upper cap as well on the radiator to release the fluid. We're going to take off this cowling so we can get access to the air handling. It's held on by 2 bolts and 2 studs. Look like this. 2 bolts, 2 studs. And you'll have to remove the filler cap to actually get it on in some instances. And that's how you remove the cowling. This is air intake and air handling. A couple of clamps that hold it on. I just took them off with a Phillips screwdriver. There's one here, one around here. This was connected onto the cover for the filter, which is held on by 4 spring clips. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4. You just pry those off and pry it off of here. Unplug it from here, which is just a simple push configuration. You push down and pull the whole thing off, and that's on the top of the air intake, which covers the filter. And then, like I said, there's just these 2 clamps holding on the screwdriver. And then there's a few vacuum hoses. This one is on the side. It just pulled off. This line here, which has a clamp that slides off fairly easy. And then there's another one down here that just has a spring clamp on it. It slides off easy. And that allows you to remove the whole air handling mechanism to get it out of your way. Also on the air handling, there's 2 bolts that go in. And they go in, one is right down here, and the other one's way at the back, right up there. 2 bolts, 10 mil. Now our configuration is slightly different than other people's configurations. You can see we have this big AC line, the high AC line coming into the front here. We also got this filler tank in the back here, as opposed to over at the side like some of these models do. What I did was I took off 2 bolts, both 10 mil, 1, 2 to release that, and I also took off the tube that ran from here to the radiator cap. Well, we had a bunch of clips and brackets and 12 mil bolts we had to take out of here to get this thing loose, both the electrical and the AC line loose, so we could take out the rad and the housings. So there was 12 mil bolts, one here, one here, one here. And then we had some clips, these sort of plastic clips that were holding on the electrical. And how those worked was I just jammed a screwdriver down in there's a little hole at the top of the clip, and I jammed those down, and pried it out, and then they pop open. Here's what those brackets and that clip looks like. So you can see it just pushes down on the inside there. So I just took a flathead screwdriver and put in there and pried it a bit, and I was able to sort of, doing that and working it with my finger, I was able to pop these up so they open up again and can be reused. So here's a coolant reservoir. It's just held on with two 12mm bolts. One goes over here, one goes over here, and then it just sort of sits in a plug at the bottom down there. You can see it down there. Okay, upper coolant holes. A couple of clamps on here. This thing was immensely difficult to get on there. Took a little bit of jamming a screwdriver under there to get the seal to break. Eventually it broke. Not without difficulty. Okay, just like other videos on the internet, we loosen up the fan housing. That's so we can get the radiator out with 3 bolts. One goes in here, number 2 goes in over here, and the third one is way down at the bottom there. And then you can see it's just loose and hanging there, clips on down at the bottom. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to loosen up this upper radiator hose. Okay, so we're down on the underside here, and we've disconnected the 2 transmission coolant lines. And you can see with the transmission coolant line disconnected, what I've done is I've just gone and put some earplugs in these holes just to make it a little bit cleaner to work on for the time being. And here's the other one down here, and there's the other transmission line. So we've done all that, plugged up the other hole here just a bit temporarily until we can start to pull out the rad. Okay, so to get the radiator out, it was basically just 4 bolts and 2 nuts. And the 1 nut was up here, and then there's 2 bolts down here, and it was the same on the other side. And then the radiator just basically pulled straight up. But one of the tricks was to make sure that the cowling for the fan cover, was completely off of the radiator and pushed as far back as it could go. And then the radiator just came straight up and out of there with a little bit of fiddling around. I mean, there was a couple little points where stuff like this got hung up on the radiator. It actually goes in like this and then gets bolted from the other side. But all in all, it just came straight up and sort of created quite a bit of a mess. But just keep a good roll of paper towel around. It wasn't too bad. And a drain pan, and you should be okay. And there you can see the radiator's out. And there's the housing, the cowling for the actual fan, the fan cover. There's the fan blades, and they came off right down here. And you can see there's four bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 nuts came off. I just used 2 12 wrenches to get them off, so I'd lock one and then pry the other. And there's a guy on the internet who did a Tundra who's got a perfect example of how this works. So you take off 3 of the nuts, and then you thread back on one of the nuts upside down, and you jam a screwdriver in there to hold it in place while you take off the last nut. And like I said, there's a guy on the internet. I'll leave a link in the description to his video, and he shows you exactly how to do this on a Tundra. Since it's a very similar engine, you're going to see the sort of the same steps that I'm following here with a few modifications for this Land Cruiser engine. Okay, there's the serpentine belt out. And you can see what I'm doing here is I'm just basically going to take a 14 mil and I'm going to pull it upward from where the position of the wrench sits now. So I'll just pull it upward, and what will happen is you can see it releases the tension on the serpentine belt, and you can get the serpentine belt off. That's a 14 mil. So next thing we're going to go after is this pulley. This pulley goes on right here with this 14 mil bolt. And then we're going to go after the thermostat housing right here. Thermostat housing will leak, so make sure you have a pan like we do down there. It has 3 bolts, 1, 2, and the third one down here, which are all of different sizes based on their location. And also as well, we're going to have to take off this clip and release that hose. So again, 1, 2, third one's down here as well. This is the timing belt cover on the left side. And you can see it just has 3 screws holding it in. 1, 2, 3, and then this thing also clamps down this long pin on the back here. And there's the 3 bolts right there. They're 10 mil. 10 mil. And now we can get our first look at the timing belt. So that's the we're getting there. Alright, here is the right side cover for the timing belt. It's not the easiest thing to get on and off. It takes 4 bolts that you can see right there, 10 mil. 1, 2, 3, and 4. This was previously taken off. It was that little pin sitting right in there that clips onto this oil hose. So we previously took that off. And then there's this god-awful clip. And this god-awful clip goes in right here. And it actually attaches onto this thing here, on this underside piece right here. And it's a bit of a miserable thing to actually get on and off. So I mean, I can't give you any instructions. I popped this out and then sort of pried it off with a screwdriver, and then I finally just managed to push it through this hole where this grommet goes, and that's for the cams, the timing sensor, the cam sensor. And basically what happened was, after I finally gave up and just carefully pushed this thing and this thing together, they were sort of combined, and I sort of pushed them back through this hole. This thing just fell off on its own. Go figure, eh? And that's basically how that works, but at least we're one step closer. So this is the upper cover of the timing belt. It's just held on with 2 bolts. One of these is related to the thermostat housing. The other one is at the bottom here, long one. And it should just pop off. It'll be a little bit sticky, but it just pops off. It's usually sticky because it's hooked on at the top here. Just pop it off, and that's that. As you can see, I've got to take off this tensioner pulley in order to get the time belt off. But in order to take off the tensioner pulley, I had to remove the alternator, which is down here, off this peg. But in order to get the alternator off, I actually had to disconnect the power steering, because this power steering pulley was blocking the alternator from coming off the peg, which we need to get off if we're going to get this tensioner pulley off. So basically it was starting with the power steering. There was 3 bolts, 1, 2, and 3, that you can access through the front of the pulley, and then this thing popped off, and that gave me enough room to be able to pull off the alternator, which is held on by a bolt on this stud, or a nut on this stud, and a bolt down below. So those 2 pieces. So these are the 3 bolts for the power steering, and here's the bolt and the nut for the alternator. And now I can get to work on getting that tensioner pulley off. Okay, so there's the tensioner pulley, and once again it's held on with 2 bolts, 2 nuts. There's the 2 nuts, 1 bolt, 1, 2 nuts, and the long bolt goes down here, and this is just where goes on the stud that the alternator sits on as well. Those are all 12 mil. Skid plate. That's the second one, the plastic one behind the metal one, held in with 10 mil bolts. There's 4 of them. One back down here, and another one right up in here. And it's the same on the other side as well. Didn't think I'd have to take that off, so for now I took it off to access get better access to the AC, but we'll see. Okay, so this holds the fan, and allows it to rotate. So it's basically the holder for the fan. You can see I took it off from around this area right in here. Like, in order to get this thing off of here, you had to remove the AC compressor. That AC compressor is far harder than it looks. What I first did was I removed this large bolt and these two nuts that were holding on this item here. They were fairly easy to see when this thing was loaded up. But what was far harder was this item. This bolt here was basically on the AC compressor, and it goes up, sort of goes up this way into the AC compressor from the outside, so that's not too hard. But you'll see on the YouTube videos they talk about removing this item here, which is like a clamp, and you can see it's sort of held on. Maybe you can see it, maybe you can't see it. It's held on with 2 Phillips screws. Those Phillips screws are rusty, and if anyone knows who's used the Phillips screws, I mean, they're not very good at the best of times, doubly so when they're rusted up like this. So there's just no way you can possibly get those screws out of there. As well, there's just no room to work back in here. This is all just solid metal. And you can't actually get a screwdriver in there. You can get a stubby in there, but you can't get any leverage on it. You can't get a ratchet in there. There's really no way to get those things off. So what I did instead was I took off this component from the back, the very back of the AC compressor. And then this item was the item that I said went up this way into the AC compressor. And then we'll take a look from the bottom side, and you'll see there's one other one that we had to take off that was a miserable pain in the ass to get off. And I'll show you how I got that off. So here we're on the underside. Now this is a JDM unit, so it's direct from Japan. The AC is a little different than what you'd see on some of the YouTube videos for like the Tundra and that sort of thing. But you can see this bolt here. This miserable prick was way up on the underside. It goes way up under here. And the only way I could get tools in here to access this thing was, first of all, to remove the oil filter. That was the obvious win. And then secondly, to get a ratchet in there with you got to have a couple of different heads on there to get that thing in there, to extenders. And I had a little short extender that I was able to use that allowed me to get in there. And then once we were able to get that, the compressor fell down, moved out of the way, and released the fan belt housing. But it is not easy, so this has taken me pretty well a better part of a day just to get this thing figured out. And it's mostly because those bolts are in such awkward places, and it's hard to get tools in there to actually do things. So my best advice is just keep taking apart stuff. In this case, we took off the oil filter, and that seemed to be the trick for getting that one item out. So there's one bolt here. There's a bolt on the side. There's another bolt that goes in here as well, and then there's a bolt in the back that holds it up. So literally there were 4 bolts in this thing, as opposed to the 3 they say on the internet, in order to get it to fall away far enough that we could get the fan cover or the fan holder off. Okay, here's the harmonic balancer. You can see that there's 4 holes in the harmonic balancer. But only 2 of them are threaded with the 8mm by 1.25s. These other 2 are not threaded, so if you're trying to get bolts into there, it won't work. These 2, however, were threaded, and I used a puller device to actually get it out. This thing was really in there really hard. I wasn't really able to use the centerpiece, and there's a point that goes on the end here that I had in. This didn't really want to crank down very well. I wound up using the bolts and popping the bolts through, and that's what actually got the harmonic balancer off. The pulley, the crank pulley off. The other issue we found was that we needed a pulley tool. So we ordered a pulley tool on Amazon, but it never arrived. So what we wound up doing was we wound up making this thing here, which is basically just a 2x4 with appropriate holes. And using that and a breaker bar with a snipe on it, it worked just fine. There's the bolt that held on the pulley. It's a 22 mil. And like I said, we used our homemade holder because our official holder didn't arrive from Amazon. It's going to take another couple of weeks to get here. So we just decided to make our own out of the 2x4. And then we used a breaker bar with a snipe on the end, with a pipe on the end, just to give us a little bit of extra leverage. And while one person held on to the 2x4, another person cranked, two-person job, and voila. There's a lower timing belt cover, held on by 3 10 mil bolts, and a fourth one way down in there. And there's your bolt. This is the next piece that has to come out. You can see down here there's a key on there that holds it into place. Make sure that when you take this off that it goes back the exact same way it came off. There's a little bit of a bend in the back, you can see there, and a little bit of divot on the front. Okay, so now I'm marking off the timing belt, the old timing belt, and you can see how the things line up there. And most importantly, you want to make sure that you identify that there's 2 teeth on either side of that thing, and you get them lined up just perfectly. So that's why you see I got 3 marks on this one. On this one over here, it's the same thing, although I can't actually see where the teeth are. I'm going to have to get them lined up exactly. I'm guessing that there will be a teeth on either side of that mark. Okay. So as you can see from down below, here's the crankshaft, and there is a dot right here on this crankshaft cog right here, and I've marked it with 1 mark because that pin, that little dot there, actually happens to be right on one of the teeth. So I want to make sure that this tooth goes right in that spot when I'm actually redoing this. And this is the tensioner I'm going to take out right now. You can see now that the timing belt is loose. We're going to take out a couple of more pulleys as well. We're going to replace those on our way to replacing the water pump as well. It's always a good idea if you're in here and you've gone to this much work, you might as well replace pieces that aren't that expensive but do go, such as the water pump and the pulleys. Why not? There are 2 pulleys out. This one's the tensioner pulley. It's 12. This is the other pulley that comes over on this side down here. So right in there. And that is a 14. Alright, here is the water pump out. Finally. Now you can see we have 5 bolts. Another bolt. A couple of studs. And what the school of YouTube won't tell you is that it's a miserable pain in the ass to get this thing out. So how I eventually got it out was by basically pulling and putting pressure on here and sort of pulling it towards the front, and then taking, yep, you got it, rubber mallet, and lightly tapping on it. Not that I care, I'm going to replace this anyways, but pounding on it as I was pulling, as I was putting the pressure on here to pull it forward. It allowed it to release, and I think the thing that really holds it on and grabs onto it is this little piece right here, this little pipe with this with that. That's basically what's making it a little difficult to get out. But in general, it does come out if you put a little pressure on this thing and you just sort of pull it out this way and then tap on it from different sides lightly with the mallet, and what that'll do is just loosen it up a bit so you can get it out. And that's basically what you're looking at now that we are down to the bottom. I just got to take off this gasket right here and put a new gasket in, so we'll do that next.